maybe let's ask first our colleague Dang from Cleaner Asia. Please introduce yourself as well. And then I already mentioned that Cleaner Asia supported a city in the Philippines to install and use these low-cost sensors. In your intervention, Dang, if I'm not sure how far you can say it, but because I would like to know the costs. I would like to know how much. I would like to know how the data compares with the conventional air quality monitor. So if you can share some of this information, even if just if it's price, it's just a range of the price. So I think this should be okay.
Sure.
Dan, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bert. And I think I have a slide deck to just also show the visuals. So for those who do not or are not familiar with Cleaner Asia, we are an international NGO founded by the World Bank, by the USAID, and the Asian Development Bank back in 2002. And we work directly with governments, both at the national and city levels. And I'm going to tell the story of the two cities, actually, which we work with in the Philippines in the deployment and use of air quality. We call it low cost, but really it's really low to medium costs nowadays. And I'm gonna share the story of how low cost monitoring or non-reference monitoring helped both of these cities in terms of their air quality management planning or clean air action planning. So next slide, please. So this is Manila City, the capital city of the Philippines, and it's a city of over around 2 million population. It's the project that we are implementing in Manila is a unique partnership supported by a private sector. So this is 3M Global supporting Cleaner Asia to partner with the Department of Public Services of Manila City, who's also represented by Ms. Kyle Amorao here in the room today. And we're very privileged to have engaged in 2019, right before the lockdown happened. We engaged with the mayor of Manila City, who provided us with the support necessary to be able to deploy sensors, especially critical in a time when air quality information was very needed by the communities. And this came actually in the time when there was lockdown in the city, there were limited motor vehicles on the roads. And so this air quality sensor network helped them in a way also to inform the public, like what are the possible air quality improvements that could result from interventions like decreasing motor vehicles in the streets. So we were able to deploy, I think we started with around 4 sensors with in background sites, in roadside sites, and also in sites where there are vulnerable populations, so in a school and also in a hospital setting. And with that data set, we were able to develop or help inform the Clean Air Action Plan of Manila City, which we finalized in 2021 under the support of the project. Now, what's interesting is that during this time, we were not, because of the lockdown and the limited capacity also of the local government and the national government, we were not able to directly do like correlation or collocation experiments or studies. And we were fortunate that actually when the quarantine period, we call it quarantine period in Manila was slowly lifting up. The reference monitor of Manila City, that is of course managed by the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, was installed. And next slide, please. We were able to do collocation or correlation activities using this reference instrument that's managed by the Environmental Management Bureau, wherein we collocated the mid-cost sensor that we had during that time. So you would see that in that particular study, we used US EPA guideline values because also during that time, our national government were not yet developing guidelines for low-cost sensors, but of course, we made sure that we adhere to what the provisions of our Philippine Clean Air Act have provided. So this is actually the richest data set of collocation. This is already running for more than 2 years. And the data set, of course, we're very willing to collaborate with our national government in sharing the data set for the formulation of guidelines. And we have been working very closely with the Regional Environmental Management Bureau, who has kindly provided us access to the data of the reference instrument. So you would see here that in the top graph, the raw sensor data is the one in blue broken line, and the reference sensor data is the one in orange line. And when we applied the correction factors from the study, we got the green line, which shows a very good correlation between the sensor data and the reference data. So in this bar plot, we are actually very pleased to get the green bar values, which is very close to the orange bar values. And in this sense, what we envision is to still continuously enrich this data set. So we haven't really disconnected the low-cost sensor with the reference sensor. And we're pleased to share that it's now on its third year. So we installed 2020 January, and it's now 2023, it's still running. And we need to answer like the sustainability aspects of monitoring. There are actually technology providers who provide this service as a data as a service or a subscription type of approach, so that local governments and national governments can still access the data. I mean, have continuous access to the data. So next slide. I think that's the story of Manila, and it's still ongoing. We are currently implementing the Clean Air Action Plan, and we continuously provide them with the data that informs them how they check whether the measures that they are implementing actually contribute to improved air quality in the different portions of the city. So this is another story of Quezon City. So you may have heard our representatives from Quezon City from several sessions in the conference so far. But this is the case of where in 2020, the city has a mix of several reference instruments from the national government and also several reference instruments from academia, research institutions. And being a big city, we actually what we did was we mapped where air quality monitoring still has gaps in terms of data coverage. That's where we leveraged support from associations like C40, who provided the seed money to expand the low-cost monitoring network. And that also motivated the city government itself to invest their own money in their reference instrument and also low-cost sensor. So right now, they are on their road to fulfilling their 5-year roadmap of completing, I think it's more than 40 sensors, low-cost sensors, in the next 5 years to cover all sites within the city that would represent background, roadside, ambient, general ambient, and also the vulnerable populations where the disadvantaged, the schools, the hospitals are located. So maybe just next slide, sorry. Just to wrap up, we really value data accuracy. More than data quality at times, but of course, we really try to balance having more and more data with good accuracy. And so that's why we put emphasis on collocation studies. And it's very important that calibration and collocation instruments are coordinated with the national government who hold the data set from reference sensors. And of course, this is more and more emphasized by Dr. Kim in her intervention earlier, that sensors are not a replacement of the reference instruments, but rather it's there to help expand the data coverage to inform targeted actions. And Of course, cost is still like an issue, and what Beth was saying. So we did for the two projects. So we did like a survey of costs, and indeed, local sensors can range from $100 per unit to around $3,000 per unit. And um, organizations, of course, like USAPA, spec would have in their database like third-party validation experiments of how the performance also vary with the cost. And usually we use that as reference, and then we do the local collocation to come up with the correction factors that's needed. So yes, and definitely ultimately working with cities in general are really becoming more exciting because they are really learning to set their own monitoring objectives. So this can be for the purposes of awareness raising, sharing data, etc. But ultimately, once in tandem with reference data coming from the national official data, then it could be a really rich data set for policy making and action. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dang. But maybe I should ask you now. You mentioned subscription. I think first time I heard of this, but probably
Mhm.
people in the room know about it. Can you say more about it? Like what does it entail and how much is it? Or
Sure. For some of the data or the technology providers, they would have packages where they would loan in like sensor units, and then offer like could be a yearly subscription to the data, meaning you would have access to the data based on a paper like access scheme. So this would also mean that for example, the maintenance of the units would be beyond or wouldn't fall under the responsibility of the city, for example, because it's really the data that they are paying for and not the unit itself. So I think it's one example that governments can consider when they want to sustain like very dense air quality monitoring.
thank you very much. Maybe later on we will have more questions for you and our other speakers.